Jack Powers.
I'm going to do 2 more solo pieces, and then we'll finish with the environment. Finish before that. I'll do this one first, because it's appropriate to the scene. Here, where others offer up their works, I pretend to nothing more than showing my mind. Life is a burning up of questions. I can't conceive of a work detached from life. I don't love detached creation. I can no longer conceive of the mind as detached from itself. Each of my works, every one of my maps, every one of the glacial blooms of my inner soul dribbles all over me. I recognize myself as much in a letter written to explain the intimate shrinkage of my being and the insane castration of my life, as in an essay exterior to myself that seems to me like an indifferent pregnancy of my mind. I suffer because the spirit is not the life, and the life is not in the spirit. I suffer from the spirit as organ, spirit as translation, spirit as intimidation with things in order to make them enter into the spirit. I suspend this book in life. I'd like it to be bitten by external things, and first of all by the fits and starts, all the twitching of my future self. All of these pages are leftover icicles of the mind. Excuse my absolute freedom. I refuse to make distinctions between any of the minutes in myself, and I don't recognize the existence of any map of the mind. You have to do away with the mind, as with literature. I say that the mind and life communicate at all levels. I want to make a book that will derange men, that will be like an open door leading them where they will never have consented to go, a door simply ajar on reality. And this is no more than a preface to a book than the poems, for example, that stake it out, for the enumeration of all the furies of a torn soul. This is merely an icicle stuck in my throat.
Those dollar bills separated the pages.
Who, in the heart of certain anxieties at the bottom of some dreams, has not known death as a shattering and miraculous sensation which nothing in the order of mental experience could never be confused? You have to be experienced in this gasping crescendo of anguish which comes over you in waves, then swells you as if blown up by some unbearable bellows. The anguish draws nigh and then withdraws, but each time fuller, each time more ponderous, which the body itself is, having reached its limits of distension and force, and yet it must go on. It's sort of a suction cup at the soul, whose tartness is like an acid sloping up the limits of which is feelable, and the soul cannot even fall back on a breakdown. For this dissension itself is false. Death is not so easily satisfied. This distension in the order of physical presence is like a film negative of that shrinking process which is to keep the mind busy over the entire area of the living body. This held in grasp is the last, really the last. It is the time for taking stock. The minute feared so much, dreaded so much, and so much dreamt of is here. And it is true that one is going to die. One watches and measures his breath, and time unfurls completely. In it all of its immensity, and is resolved in such a way that is bound to dissolve without a trace. Go ahead and die, you poor dogged bone. They are quite aware that your thought is not complete or finished. In fact, no matter of which way you turn your head, you haven't even started thinking, which makes no difference. The fate you are assailed by now is drawing and quartering you in absolute exact proportion to this impossibility. For you are quite aware that you have to make it over to this other side, which nothing in you, not even this body, above all this body, and you will take leave of without ever forgetting its substance, thickness, and impossible asphyxia is prepared for. And indeed, it will be like a bad dream, where you are outside the bearings of the body, which you still manage to drag this far, making you suffer and being enlightened by its deafening impressions. With respect that is always bigger or smaller than you, where nothing in the feeling you bring to it of the archetypical ground orientation can any more be satisfied. So that's it. That's where it's always at. And what howl like a dog barking in a dream and the feeling of this desolation and malaise without name makes your flesh crawl and you gag in the panic of a mad drowning? No, it isn't so. And it is not so. But the worst thing about it is so. And at the same time, you get this feeling of desperate truth, where it seems you're going to die again. You're going to die a second time. You say it to yourself, you open your mouth and you say it. You're going to die, you're going to die. I'm going to die a second time. And just at that very moment, some humidity and moistness from iron or rock or wind refreshes you unbelievably and consoles your thought, and you yourself liquefy as you flow to your death, your new state of death. This running water is death, and from the moment you contemplate yourself serenely and record your new sensations, the great identification begins. You died, and yet here you are again, living. Except this time, you are alone. I just described the sensation of anguish and dream, the anguish seeping into your dreams, and this is more or less how I imagine agony seeps into you and perfects itself finally in death. Anyway, such dreams cannot lie, and they do not lie, and these death sensations laid end to end, this suffocation, this despair, these spells of drowsiness, desolation, silence, don't we see them in the enlarged suspension of a dream, with the feeling that one of the faces of a new reality is perpetually looking over our shoulder? At the bottom of death or dream is where anguish really takes hold. This anguish, like rubber bands stretched and suddenly snapping in your throat, is neither unknown nor novel. But as you seep into unawares, your body turning back into clock the skull, it had to pass through, bearer of consciousness and life, and consequently a supreme suffocation, and consequently a superior dismemberment. It too had to pass through the smallest possible opening. But it agonizes to the limit of the pores, and this skull, by dint of shaking and turning carefully, has got the feeling that it is swollen up, and its terror has assumed the shape of pimples underneath the skin. And so, after all, there is nothing new about death. But on the contrary, it is all too well known, for at the end of this distillation of the viscera, don't we see the image of the panic we have already felt more than once? The very force of despair lies in its seeming reiteration of certain childhood situations where death appeared in such clarity, like a gush of continual disruption. Childhood knows sudden awakenings of the mind, intense prolongations of thought which get lost again at later age, and certain childhood panics and certain grandiose and irrational fears which lurk in a feeling of extra-human threat. The incontestable fact is that death appears like rending a nearby membrane, like lifting a veil which is the world. Who has no memory of unimaginable magnifications of the order of a total mental reality of which we were not all amazing at the same time, but were given truly delivered to a forest of one's childhood professions? These mental prolongations were impregnated with a perfect knowledge, impregnated all things, were crystallized eternal, but what strange thoughts it emphasizes how much disintegrated mentor it reconstitutes human atoms. The soul could be reborn, however, but it is not reborn. For although each somewhat it feels it is still dreaming, it hasn't yet transformed itself to that dream state with which it can truly identify. At this instant of his mortal daydream, the living man comes to the great wall of impossible identification and brutally withdraws his soul. There he is, cast out and onto the naked level of the senses, in a light without dimension, outside of the infinite musicality of his nerve waves, prey to the boundless hunger of the air, to the absolute cold.